The first time I noticed Khan, he was standing by the school's main gate, adjusting his backpack straps with a quiet determination. His uniform was neatly pressed, his shoes shined to perfection, a stark contrast to my perpetually untucked shirt and scuffed sneakers. He had an air of innocence about him, the kind that made him an easy target for teasing. They called him Khan, a name that carried a certain weight, yet he seemed oblivious to any authority it might have given him. They called me Baloch, not my real name, but a nickname I had earned for my wild nature, my ability to navigate trouble like a desert traveler finding water. Ninth grade had given me a sense of seniority, a playful arrogance that made me feel untouchable. Eighth graders, like Khan, were nothing more than background noise in my world, until the day my friends challenged me to a ridiculous game. "He's too naive," one of them had laughed during lunch. "I bet you could make him believe anything." That was how it started. A simple bet, a harmless prank, at least that's what I told myself. My task was simple. Get close to Khan, make him trust me, and then pull the rug out from under his feet. The idea of manipulating someone so trusting should have made me hesitate. Didn't. The first move. I approached Khan casually after school, catching up to him as he walked toward the bus stop. "Hey, Khan, right?" I said, keeping my tone friendly, as if we had spoken before. He turned, startled, but nodded. Up close, I noticed how his eyes held a quiet depth, like a still lake before a storm. "I'm Baloch. I've seen you around," I continued, as if my interest in him had always been there. "You play football, right?" He hesitated, then gave a small smile. "Yeah. Not very well, though," I chuckled. "That makes two of us. Maybe we should practice together." His surprise was evident, but after a moment's pause, he nodded. "Sure, why not?" That was easier than I expected. A growing friendship? Or something else? At first, everything went according to plan. I sought him out between classes, sat with him during lunch, and even partnered with him in group projects. My friends watched from afar, snickering, reminding me that this was all part of the game. But something unexpected happened. Khan wasn't just kind, he was genuinely good. The kind of person who never spoke ill of others, who helped classmates with homework without expecting anything in return. He had a quiet humor, subtle but sharp, and a way of seeing the world that made me question my own cynicism. I found myself enjoying his company in ways I hadn't anticipated. What started as an act began to feel real. The moment I knew it was different. One afternoon, as we walked across the school field, Khan suddenly turned to me. "Why did you start talking to me?" he asked, not accusing, just curious. My heart skipped a beat. I had rehearsed lies for this moment, but for some reason, they caught in my throat. "I don't know," I admitted, and it wasn't entirely false. "I just thought you seemed interesting." He considered that for a moment before nodding. "Well, I'm glad you did." And that was the problem, because in that moment I wasn't. I had come into his life with the wrong intentions, but now, standing beside him under the setting sun, I realized I didn't want to be the reason he got hurt. Yet the bet wasn't over, and I wasn't sure if I was ready to face what that meant. At first, I told myself it was nothing, a trick of the mind, a temporary attachment. But the more time I spent with Khan, the harder it became to ignore the sinking feeling in my chest, that nagging, uncomfortable truth pressing against my ribs. I was supposed to be playing a game, so why did it feel like I was the one being played? An unwelcome realization. It started with the little things. I began noticing details about Khan that I hadn't paid attention to before. The way his brow furrowed in concentration when he read. The way he bit his lower lip when he was trying not to laugh. The way he always held the door open for others without expecting a thank you. His kindness wasn't forced. It wasn't an act. It was simply who he was. And it terrified me. I had spent years perfecting the art of indifference, of playing games and never getting caught in my own web. But Khan was undoing me piece by piece without even trying. One afternoon, as we sat in the cafeteria, he nudged his untouched sandwich toward me. "You didn't bring lunch today." I raised an eyebrow, and he shrugged. "So eat." I wanted to argue, to tease him, to tell him I wasn't some charity case. But the way he said it, so casually, so effortlessly, made my throat tighten. I took the sandwich. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't have a comeback. The joke that wasn't funny anymore. The problem with pretending is that, after a while, you forget where the act ends and the truth begins. My friends still thought this was a game. They would ask if Khan was falling for it yet, if I had set him up for the grand finale. At first, I played along, forced the smirks, nodded at the right moments. But each time I laughed at their jokes, it felt like something inside me cracked. And then came the day I realized I wasn't laughing anymore. It was after school, and I was leaning against the staircase railing, waiting for Khan. He was late, probably still in the library where he spent most of his free time. One of my friends, Samir, nudged me. "You're getting in too deep." I scoffed. "What are you talking about?" Samir smirked. "You know exactly what I'm talking about. This isn't part of the plan. The bet. The stupid, childish prank that had long stopped being funny." I looked away. "It's fine." Samir studied me for a moment, then let out a low chuckle. "Wow, you actually like him, don't you?" The words sent a jolt through me. I opened my mouth to deny it, but no sound came out. Samir shook his head, laughing. "Damn, you're screwed. And the worst part? He was right. Jealousy. A taste of my own medicine. I didn't think of myself as a jealous person. But that changed the day I saw Khan laughing with someone else. It was a junior from his class, a quiet boy named Denial. They were standing by the basketball court, sharing a book, their heads tilted toward each other as they whispered about something. I told myself it was nothing, that it didn't matter. But when Khan laughed, really laughed, that full, genuine kind of laugh, I felt something sharp twist in my stomach. And for the first time, I understood. I had never worried about Khan walking away from me because I had always assumed I was the one in control. But seeing him with someone else made me realize how little control I actually had. And that scared me more than anything. The moment of truth. That evening, as we walked home together, I was quieter than usual. Khan noticed. He always noticed. "You okay?" he asked. I forced a smirk. Why wouldn't I be? He didn't look convinced, but he didn't push. After a beat of silence, he suddenly said, "I'm glad we became friends." I almost stopped walking. Friends. Was that all this was to him? Had I been reading too much into everything? Or worse, had I lost my chance at something more because I had been too much of a coward to admit what I really felt? I swallowed hard, forcing my voice to stay steady. "Yeah, me too." But deep down, I wasn't sure if that was the truth, or the biggest lie I had ever told. Guilt is a slow poison. It doesn't strike all at once. It seeps in drop by drop until one day you wake up drowning in it. For weeks, I had been convincing myself that I could control this, that I could keep pretending and no one would get hurt. I was wrong. The beginning of the end. The truth came out on an ordinary afternoon, in the least dramatic way possible. It wasn't a big reveal. No grand confrontation in the middle of the schoolyard. Just a quiet, careless slip of the tongue. I wasn't even there when it happened. Samir, always grinning, always careless, had been talking to some classmates, laughing about old pranks we had pulled. And then, without thinking, he said it. "And then there's Khan. Baloch started talking to him on a dare. Can you believe he actually fell for it?" Laughter. Shrugged shoulders. A joke to them. A knife to Khan. I found out only when I saw him later that day, standing by the lockers, staring at me like I was a stranger. The confrontation. I knew something was wrong the second I saw him. Khan wasn't the type to get angry. He was quiet, thoughtful, he processed emotions before reacting. But today, his expression was unreadable. Cold. "Is it true?" His voice was calm, but there was something sharp beneath it. I forced a laugh. "Is what true? That I was a joke to you?" The world tilted. I could have lied. I could have played dumb, pretended I didn't know what he was talking about. But the way he was looking at me, like he was already mourning whatever we had, made it impossible. "Khan, listen. Just tell me the truth." And that was the worst part. He wasn't yelling. He wasn't accusing. He just wanted the truth. And I owed him that much. I swallowed hard. It started that way. His breath hitched, like I had knocked the air out of him. But I swear it wasn't. Stop. His voice was quiet, but it cut through me like a blade. For a moment, he didn't say anything. He just stared at me, like he was trying to find the person he thought I was. But he didn't find him, because that person never existed. Finally, he exhaled a shaky breath. I trusted you, and then he walked away, and I let him. The hollow aftermath. Losing someone doesn't always happen in an instant. Sometimes it happens slowly, one step at a time until one day they're gone. But with Khan, it happened all at once. The next day, he wasn't waiting for me after class. He wasn't sitting at our usual table. He wasn't avoiding me, but he wasn't looking at me either. I had never realized how much space someone could take up in your life until they were gone. And the worst part? I had no one to blame but myself. The letter that was never read. A week passed. Then two. I tried to talk to him. He never gave me the chance. So I did the only thing I could think of. I wrote him a letter. It wasn't poetic. It wasn't dramatic. It was just the truth. The truth I should have told him from the beginning. I told him that, yes, it had started as a joke. But somewhere along the way, he had stopped being a game to me. Somewhere along the way, I had fallen for him. I slipped the letter into his locker before school, my heart pounding. But by the end of the day, I saw it. Still in the same place. Untouched. Unopened. A clear message. Some things are beyond fixing. The letter stayed in his locker for 3 days. By the 4th, it was gone. I didn't know if he had finally read it or if he had simply thrown it away without a second thought. The not knowing was the worst part. But maybe, in some way, I deserved that. Because if there was one thing I had learned from all this, it was that once trust is broken, no amount of apologies can stitch it back together the same way. An empty space where he used to be. Life moved on. That was the cruel part. School remained the same hallways, the same classrooms, the same voices. But for me, everything had shifted. Khan was still there, but he wasn't there anymore. We existed in the same space but in different worlds. He had his own friends now. I saw him laughing with them sometimes the way he used to laugh with me. And every time, it felt like a sharp reminder of what I had lost. The silence between us was the loudest thing I had ever heard. A final conversation. It was months before we spoke again. The school year was ending, and the realization hit me like a punch to the gut. This might be my last chance. I found him alone in the library, flipping through a book absent-mindedly. He looked up when I sat down across from him, his face unreadable. "Hey," I said, my voice quieter than I had intended. He nodded but didn't say anything. I took a deep breath. "I never meant to hurt you," he sighed, closing the book but keeping his fingers between the pages. "I know." I blinked. "You do." He looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw something in his eyes that I hadn't noticed before. Not anger, not resentment, just disappointment. "Yeah," he said, "but that doesn't change what happened." I swallowed. "I miss you," he exhaled slowly. "I miss the person I thought you were." The words hit harder than if he had yelled at me. Because that was the truth, wasn't it? He hadn't lost me. He had lost the illusion of me. And maybe, in some way, I had lost myself too. The last goodbye. I wanted to say something, anything that could fix it. But no words came. After a moment, he stood up, slinging his bag over his shoulder. "Take care, Baloch." Not with anger. Not with bitterness. Just finality. I watched him walk away, knowing this time I wouldn't chase after him. Some endings don't come with dramatic gestures or second chances. Some just come quietly, leaving behind nothing but lessons. And this was one I would never forget.